This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN and Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila in Vietnam. Hello, Charlene.
Hello, I'm Charlene Navaja, bringing you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. The United Nations said an estimated 100,000 people have been displaced by new fighting between Myanmar's military and rebel groups in the east of the coup-stricken country. Welcome again.
And earlier, we were able to talk to the Philippine ambassador to Myanmar, His Excellency Eduardo E. Kapunan Jr., to talk about the present situation in the country.
Malacanang said members of the Communist Party of the Philippines armed wing, the New People's Army, must be punished for planting anti-personnel mines in Masbate.
And here in Vietnam, once a model for its successful handling of the pandemic, has started asking the public donations to buy vaccines as it struggles to contain a new coronavirus wave.
The United Nations said an estimated 100,000 people have been displaced by new fighting between Myanmar's military and rebel groups in the east of the coup-stricken country. Myanmar has been in chaos and its economy paralyzed since the generals ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's government in February, accusing it of fraud during the 2020 elections. Fighting has flared in several communities, especially in townships that have seen a high death toll at the hands of police, and some locals have formed defense forces. Recent clashes and indiscriminate attacks by security forces against civilian areas had forced an estimated 100,000 to flee their homes in eastern Kaya state near the Thai border, according to the UN's Myanmar office. Those in areas hit by fighting were in urgent need of food, water, shelter, and health care, according to the UN, adding that travel restrictions imposed by security forces were delaying the delivery of much-needed aid. Locals in Kaya State have accused the military of using artillery shells that have landed in villages. More than 800 people have been killed across the country in a brutal military crackdown on dissent since February, according to a local monitoring group. Myanmar's national economy and banking system have been paralyzed since the army's power grab. Livelihoods have been lost after strikes and factory closures. Fuel prices have shot up, and those lucky enough to have bank savings face day-long queues to withdraw their cash.
Earlier, we were able to talk to the Philippine ambassador to Myanmar, His Excellency Eduardo E. Kapunan Jr., to talk about the present situation in the country. Let's listen.
Okay, welcome again to the program. Philippine Ambassador to Myanmar, Mr. Ambassador Eduardo Kapunan Jr. Maraming salamat po sa pagpaunlak niyo sa aming imbitasyon na makasama namin kayo ulit ngayon dito sa aming programa.
I would like to inform you na anytime, kung kailangan ninyo ng information from Myanmar, just call me.
Okay, so sir, you just arrived in the Philippines.
Yes.
Tell
And
us.
I just finished my quarantine as well.
Oh, okay. Ilan days kayo nag-quarantine, sir?
Sa Citadine Hotel sa Ortigas for 10 days.
10 days, all right. Sir, when you left Myanmar, can you tell us the latest situation there?
No, not only when I left, but I am kept abreast by my staff in Myanmar about the daily developments going on. So I received reports as of yesterday, and I'm expecting one again for today. Ganun po yung ano namin ang aming arrangement doon, so that we are always we always look at it, analyze it, and see what might happen next.
So, what is the present situation in Myanmar, Mr. Ambassador, from the last time we talked? Has it gone better? Has it gone...
Maraming pagbabago po sa the time that we last talked. Like for example, nung huli tayo mag-usap, there were just about 700 deaths all over Myanmar.
Yes.
Ang cause of death are gunshot wounds. Now it's reaching something like 800 plus. And of course, may bagong mga developments ngayon doon. We are starting to see explosive devices exploding in Yangon and in other states around Yangon. And so far we have counted about 50 plus explosions. But one thing peculiar about these explosions is that nung ina-analyze namin yung mga videos ng explosion, ang usok ng putok is white. And you know, for a trained eye, I know for a fact that it is a low detonation process. Meaning, ang ginamit na explosive is not really high explosives. Para bang yung mga pulbura, black powder ng debilitador, alam mo yung firecrackers na pinalaki nila, yun ang pumuputok. It's mga improvised explosive. I have yet to see an explosion na itim mang usok, which we call full detonation. Pagka full ang itim mang usok. And what I peculiar about this is minimal ang casualties. Meaning, nagpapaputok sila and mostly attributed to those who are against the military government. Pero when they situate ng nasasaktan, minimal lang. Siguro wala nga siguro mga 10 ang nasaktan sa mga ganito. Walang masyadong deaths. Wala masyadong shrapnel ang mga explosive nila. Yun ang isang bago doon. May isa pang bagong nangyayari ngayon. The forces against the military government are starting to assassinate mga people whom they think are informers of the military regime. Like for example, sa mga townships nila, may designate ang military regime na parang parang mga township administrators. And if these township administrators have created damage against these people who are against the government, meron mga incidents doon ang mga na-assassinate ito, nasaksak, na gano'n, nababaril. So there is this current development na ang opposition ng gobyerno is engaging in what I would call terrorist activities. No? Pero because of the small amount of casualties sa bomba nila, parang nababawas ako, parang announcement lang ito na, hey guys, we are still here. Buhay pa kami, hindi kami nawawala pa. Parang gano'n. Yun ang mga pagbabago ngayon na nangyayari.
But the Myanmar government classified this resistance government as terrorist.
Yes, they have classified. That's why they refuse to talk to these people. The military junta refuses to talk to these people because of their classification as terrorists. So nung in-announce ng military government na we are open to peace talks, they were referring to yung ethnic armed organizations. Not this one na against the government. Kasi ethnic armed organizations, it is believed that they are only fighting for their own local interest.
Yes.
Not national interest. So, yun ang medyo mabigat ngayon maramdaman na kahit na may problema sila sa political opposition, nagsisimula ng mag-gain ng strength, ayaw nila magpag-usap.
Mhm.
And then the only way para ma-settle sa ito is kung ma-open yung window na mag-usap na ang dalawa, di ba?
Opo.
Kasi kung magpatayan lang yung nasa pagkakatugalit na yan, it will just heighten the anger, it will just heighten, the animosities. And hindi ko nakikitaan ng parang magkasundo sila. So, yun ngayon po ang thrust ng ASEAN na pagpaupuin sila para mag-usap-usap.
Our Foreign Secretary, Teodoro Locsin, is apparently supporting, of course, democracy and the ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. He was quite vocal about it. Is that the right approach in your view? And should the Philippines or ASEAN as a whole be doing more, do you think, to support the protests in the streets or to put an end to chaos there?
Actually, as of now, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, they're supporting the old government, the duly elected democratic government. The other members of ASEAN are still parang kinakapa pa nila
Yes.
ang sitwasyon. Which brings ASEAN to a very peculiar situation. Kasi ASEAN, hindi nag-decide kundi consensus, di ba?
Yes.
So, after the meeting of ASEAN last June, ASEAN came up with a 5-point consensus recommendation. And none of these 5 were active. Well, sa action ng Myanmar, because si Minong Lang yung general ng commanding general ng Myanmar attended the conference, and the perception was that karoon ng consensus dun sa 5 points na yun. But pagbalik sa Myanmar ng nila, they said that we can only comply with the 5 points of ASEAN if the situation stabilizes.
Yes.
Now, it's really a question of how do you define stability? Diba? And stability vis-a-vis whom? When in fact they are closing their doors against, the anti-government faction.
Well, the US, the UK, the EU, all these countries and entities have already imposed sanctions and
Yes.
on various officials and within the military junta in Myanmar. Or is that not far enough in your view?
Are you getting my personal point of view? Siguro as a ambassador, I will not want to express my own personal point. I have my own personal point of view, but whatever I say here now is going to be construed as a government position. But one thing I know, the government is quite focused on the items that our government has said that, number 1, they should sit together to talk. Number 2, release all political prisoners, release Aung San Suu Kyi, and go back to what we call status quo ante, as it was before February 1. So that's the position of the Philippines, and what has been, described by the Philippines in all of these venues where ASEAN have been meeting. Tapos isa pang medyo nakakabahala sa Myanmar ngayon. It
Yes.
is the economic impact of civil disobedience movement. Ang economic impact na siguro hindi na foresee ito. As of now, the banking system of Myanmar is approaching crisis. Ang cash nila sa bangko nauubos na, walang pumapasok. Alam mo ng banking system, di ba? People deposit, deposit, pinapahiram. That's how the bank earns, no? Sa financial services. But as of now, ang linya ng mga ATM machines, kilometro ang haba, every single day. Meaning na, ang lumalabas na pera every single day, although may limit yun, pero nasa maximum limit ang pag-withdraw. So, with this development, I think even World Bank mentioned that there are more people crossing the poverty line now, going below the poverty line. And when this becomes a very, very pronounced event, of course, inflation starts to come in. Pagka nagkaroon ng inflation, prices becomes unstable. The producers, the farmers, maaaring para makarecover sila, angat sila ang presyo para makarecover sila. Ang mga consumers naman na nawalan ng pera, hindi na kaya bumili ng mga pagkain, di ba? Mga ganon na situation. A situation that must be carefully monitored. And I think all UN organizations are pointing to this situation. Na kung patuloy itong mangyayari, mas marami nang hindi makakain. Sabi nga nila, a hungry people is an angry people. So, you know what I mean, di ba?
Yes, that's right. The coup took place also under the threat of COVID. And any prolonged stalemate, as you say nga po, will only worsen the plight of the people of Myanmar. Paano po yung mga... Yes, go ahead, Ambassador.
In other words, ang tumatama sa Myanmar ay double whammy, COVID, and of course, the economic collapse. Both things are quite fatal to a country. There is even the belief that Myanmar has gone back to where it was 5 years ago during the military regime. So it has gone back. And then there's a new development. Ang cross-border trade ng Myanmar isinara. Kasi mga produkto na pumapasok sa cross-border are also produced in Myanmar by military businesses because people want to, ayaw nilang tangkilikin ng military businesses, walang bibili ng produkto nila. So, sinara nila ang trading doors para walang produkto pasok. Ang kanilang produkto lang ang i-consume. Now, this is a new development and I really think it is not contributing any better sa economic situation. Because when there is lack of competition, prices become very, very wild. Diba?
True. That's right. Mr. Ambassador, what effects, if any, might Myanmar's, what's happening now in Myanmar could have an effect on neighboring countries, like, for example,
ASEAN.
Thailand, yes, or ASEAN, yes.
Well, malaking epekto nito. Ang unang effect is, if ASEAN is going to rely on consensus as a mode of decision-making, and if there is no consensus, so what next? ASEAN is hindi makakakilos, di ba? But in the ASEAN chapter, mayroon naman nakalagay doon na what will ASEAN do in case ang consensus is not met. But that has to be fleshed out yet. Kailangan pag-usapan na mas malalim yan because it can mean the success of ASEAN or the failure of the ASEAN. Ano po yung nakikita natin.
Other than sanctions, how else can governments or ASEAN, do you think, can pressure Myanmar?
Talking about mga possibilities, maraming possibilities. But ASEAN is such a strict organization that, consensus building has to happen. And ASEAN is so proud of that method of making decisions, consensus.
Yes.
Sa tingin ko, personally, mukhang yun din ang nagtatali sa kanya ngayon for certain actions na kailangan. So what will ASEAN do? I do not know.
And you also mentioned, that's right, no? Like you also mentioned, Mr. Ambassador, yung plight nga ng people of Myanmar, and then nasa poverty line na most of them po, sabi niyo nga po.
45%.
45%.
Yes, are crossing below the poverty line.
What do you think is the military junta trying to achieve here?
First of all, meron silang 5-point program din naman na sabi nila ang unang na-achieve is to clean up the election process because they're alleging that the election in last November was a fraud. Number two, they want to address the COVID-19 issue, which is not being addressed now. Number three, stabilize nila economy. But it is not stabilizing. In other words, 4 and 5 kanila mga objectives nila, hindi nila ma-achieve or hindi nila napag-isipan masyado sa pagplano nila.
Mhm.
The economic portion is, I think, the most important part of that plan. Na dapat pag-isipan ng mabuti anong economic impact.
Mhm.
Because after all, if you're claiming to be fighting for the people and you keep your people hungry, who are you fighting for? Diba?
Kumusta naman po yung mga kababayan natin doon?
Okay naman sila. We used to have about 1,400 Filipinos there occupying mga middle or top management positions sa mga companies. We only have about 600 now left. No? And we are constantly asking for them to fill up a survey form kung sino nang gusto umuwi. Katulad ng pag-uwi ko dito, we only had about 50 passengers. Yung aeroplano, 180 yung passengers. So, kailangan padaanin namin sa Phnom Penh, Myanmar, Bangkok, para lahat ng mga Pilipino doon na gusto umuwi. Parang sweeper flight na yan ang nangyari. Parang nanguligta kami ng mga Pilipino all over the Indo-Chinese, sa Indo-China. So, gano'n ang nangyari. And the embassy, the OWA, DOLE, and the DFA, we are all willing to finance these repatriation flights. In fact, nainggit ngayon ng ibang mga nationalities sa British, sa England. Ay, announce nga, uy, alis na kayo. Pwede kayo bigyan ng pumasahe, hindi kayo bigyan ng aeroplano. Uwi na kayo, parang gano'n.
Meron po ba tayong triage plan for Filipinos there in case they get caught in these chaos, disasters, or calamities?
We have our own contingency plan,
Yes.
which we keep to our hearts. Kasi nga ayaw din namin ipalabas muna na nag-i-evacuate ang Pilipino because of the military junta. So the cover is all COVID. COVID yan lahat.
Okay.
So we have, yung una is, how do we communicate with the Filipinos? May contingency plan na rin yan. Saan namin sila dadalhin kung makuha na namin sila? Meron yung plano na yan. Saan namin sila isasakay? Kung sarado na ang airport, hindi na pwede. Paano ang gagawin namin? So, na-cover na namin yan sa aming contingency plan. Sorry, hindi ko lang ma-describe masyado kasi medyo, I keep it confidential sa namin.
I understand, yes. Okay. So, sir, baka meron kayong gustong iparating sa mga nanonood po ngayon sa inyo.
Well, the only thing, turo ng message ko lang is para sa mga relatives ng mga Pilipinong naiiwan doon. Kasi I'll tell you the story. Meron isang Pilipina doon, na tinanong namin, gusto mo na ba umuwi? Sabi niya, sir, hindi po pwede. Ayaw pa. Pero yung nanay niya, nag-communicate sa embassy, bakit hindi niya pa pinapauwi? Anak ko. Na doon sa things na hindi namin aawayan kami ng magulang. Pero yung tao mismo, ayaw naman. And you know what? Marami sa Myanmar ayaw umalis dahil sa mga alaga nilang aso, pusa. Kasi hindi nila matransport. So, wala naman tayong magagawa doon, di ba?
Di ibig sabihin, no, siguro komportable naman sila. Hindi naman sila.
In a way, komportable sila. As long as hindi lang sila mag-participate sa mga demonstrations, mga rally, huwag silang lumabas ng bahay after curfew, huwag sila mag-ipon-ipon sa lugar na maaaring maging delikado. Basta maingat lang sila, as far as I can think of, mukhang safe pa naman. Magulang, yun ang gusto ko sabihin. Huwag kayo masyadong mag-alala. Andun ang embassy, andun ang gobyerno ng Pilipinas, andun ang Department of Labor, OWA, na konting pitik lang ganyan, nagre-respond ka agad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your time. At saka thank you very much for being responsive to our Filipino community there. Sana po, the next time we talk, okay na po sana. Ano po?
Yun na nga ang hinihintay ko eh. Sana nga wala nang problema. And of course, we can all help by praying for it.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your time, as always.
As always, walang anuman po. You can call me anytime.
This portion is brought to you by Security Bank.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
It's time to take one step further and face the impossible. Time to search the unknown and fight for the truth. Time to overcome boundaries and connect the world. It's time for DW News.
Welcome back to the program. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has apologized for the delays in its vaccination rollout. Now, here's Jazz Diona joining us from our EBC Bureau in Thailand. Hello, Jazz.
Thank you, Alma, and good afternoon. And yes, in Thailand's headline, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha apologized for delays on the government's widespread COVID-19 immunization program on Tuesday. The Prime Minister said that vaccination distribution was limited because of the small batches the government is receiving. However, he assured that this would be improved as additional supplies arrive. He added that the government will try to get as many more vaccines as possible so that next month, more vaccine doses will be given out and services at provincial sites will be manageable. When vaccines become available, he said distribution would focus on infected people, risk employees, as well as tourists and key economic locations. The government will begin receiving vaccines, for they had agreed to purchase 61 million doses of AstraZeneca's vaccine from Siam Bioscience and 6 million doses from Sinovac. They also plan to order additional 8 million doses from Sinovac, 25 million from Pfizer-BioNTech, 25 million from Johnson & Johnson, and still under negotiation for extra supplies. Moreover, Alma mass vaccinations began Monday with over 400,000 doses administered, and total number of vaccine recipients in the country has exceeded 4 million. According to the Public Health Secretary, Katipumwong Rejit, more than 1 million doses of Sinovac will arrive tomorrow, and supplies from AstraZeneca will arrive on 14th of June. As of Tuesday, 750,000 Sinovac dosages has been distributed around the country. According to Public Health Minister Anutin Chanvirakul, vaccines have already been supplied to all provinces, and it was up to authorities to distribute them widely. This update is from Bangkok Post. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Jazz, for your updates. Looking forward to more updates coming from Thailand. Stay safe.
Likewise, Alma, and reporting live from Thailand, this is Jasper Diona, and we live in interesting times.
Russia is considering transferring its vaccine technology to the country to ensure enough supplies. Here's Chriselle Cunha of EBC Vietnam Bureau. Chriselle?
Hello, Charlene. That's right. For our COVID-19 tally update, Vietnam reports 64 new COVID-19 cases just this morning. The Ministry of Health confirmed 23 imported cases and 41 community infection cases of COVID-19 this morning, raising the national patient tally to 9,222. The imported cases includes 22 Vietnamese nationals and 1 Syrian. All of them are crew members departing from India, Indonesia, and Malaysia. The national caseload includes 7,614 local infections and 1,608 imported cases. And currently, Ho Chi Minh City is on its 10th day of the 15-day imposed lockdown under Directive number 15. This means that a gathering of 10 and more outside public places or offices and schools and hospitals is not allowed, and people are required to keep a distance of at least 2 meters from each other in public places, while all the service establishments are required to close, except those are selling essential goods and services. Now, going back to our headline, Russia is considering transferring Sputnik V vaccine production technology to Vietnam, said President Russian Federal Council Ivanovka Matvienko. Matvienko made the above statement during a phone conversation with top Vietnamese legislator Vuong Dinh Huê on Tuesday. Vuong expressed thanks to Russia's donation of 1,000 Sputnik V vaccine doses to Vietnam earlier this year, as well as its commitment to give priority to the Southeast Asian country to acquire 20 million Sputnik V vaccine doses. The government of Vietnam is set goal to have 150 million vaccine doses on its ongoing free vaccination program that has been deployed since March 8, 2020. In the latest move, the government launched a national COVID-19 vaccine fund to mobilize support and donations from domestic and foreign individuals and organizations to secure funding importation of foreign vaccines and research and development and production of domestic vaccines. That's the update from Vietnam. Back to you, Charlene.
Thank you so much for your updates, Chriselle. Please do take care.
Likewise, Charlene. Reporting live from Ho Chi Minh City, I am Chriselle Yacuna. We live in interesting times.
Back here in the country, Malacanang said members of the Communist Party of the Philippines, armed wing, the New People's Army or NPA, must be punished for planting anti-personnel mines in Masbate. In a virtual press conference, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said NPA rebels are guilty of committing an international crime due to the use of these landmines. Let's listen in.
Alam niyo po yung paggamit ng landmines is an international crime. Hindi lang po yung krimen dito sa Pilipinas, that is a crime against humanity, it is a war crimes. Pinagbabawal po yan ng Ottawa Convention, no? Dahil ang landmines po, linalabag yung prinsipyo ng distinction sa international humanitarian law dahil kahit sinong paa po ay po pwede mag-trigger ng pagsabok yan, hindi lang ng paa ng mandirigma. So yan po isang international crime at importante na mahuli, malitis, maparusahan ang mga tao ng NPA na patuloy pong gumagamit ng landmines. Ulitin ko po, that's an international crime, a crime against the international community. That is the worst crime that anyone can commit, and the NPA is guilty of it.
Now, 2 people, including a young football player of the Far Eastern University, were killed while a minor was wounded in an blast believed to have been planted by NPA guerrillas in Anas village in Masbate City. Killed in the incident were FEU varsity player Keith Absalon, 21, and his cousin Nolven Absalon, 40. Nolven's son, 16-year-old Crispin Daniel, sustained injuries. Now, the victims were riding on a bicycle when a suspected APM detonated in Purok 4 in Anas Village in Masbate City. And aside from this unprovoked attack against the Absalons, Lieutenant General Antonio Parlade Jr., Armed Forces of the Philippines Southern Luzon Command Chief, said communist terrorists also torched a Globe Telecom cell tower on the same day and rigged a landmine in a nearby light post at around 3 a.m. in Barangay Humapon, Legazpi City, Albay, to maim and kill responding government security troops.
And in a related news, the Department of Interior and Local Government, or DILG, on Wednesday called on the Communist Party of the Philippines, or CPP, and its armed wing, the New People's Army, the NPA, to turn over those responsible for the murder of Far Eastern University football player Keith Absalon and his cousin in Masbate so that they may face a public trial for their crimes. Now that the CPP-NPA has accepted full responsibility for the senseless murder, it now becomes their duty to turn over the terrorists responsible for the deaths so that justice may be served to their families and loved ones. Interior Secretary Eduardo M. Anyo said in a news release. Anyo said it is not enough that they took responsibility and let bygones be bygones. He said the ends of justice required that those responsible must be held accountable for their crimes against the people under the laws of the Republic of the Philippines. He added that the public could never trust the supposed internal probe to be conducted by the CPP-NPA because they do not adhere to established rules of procedure and have their own brand of revolutionary justice. He challenged the Makabayan bloc to demand the turnover of the suspects, as it is their sworn duty as government officials and as members of the House of Representatives. He said this is the least they can do for the families and loved ones of the victims who are crying out for justice. Anyo was referring to the mass graves of former communist cadres who were summarily executed by the CPP-NPA in internal purges in the 1980s and 1990s, as well as the murders of former NPA cadres who were summarily executed for leaving the terror group.
National Task Force Against COVID-19 Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said the country's vaccination average rate has notably decreased due to the lack of delivery of COVID vaccines, particularly on the last week of May and the first week of June. Let's listen.
And then meron tayong the Philippines reduced its 7-day moving average due to lack of supply but expected to rebound this week with impending deliveries of 10 million doses this June. So meron po tayong impending deliveries ng June. So mababa po ang ating average vaccination considering that yung ating delivery po nung last week ng May at saka po yung first week of June naantala po. So nagkaroon lang po ng delivery this June 6 kahapon lang po. But the good news is that the COVAX and Gavi remain focused and committed to inoculate at least 30% of the global population. So makikita po natin yung COVAX and Gavi nung nagkaroon po tayo ng meeting na ito po ay in-administered ng Japan, ay marami pong silang matatawag na commitment na at least to inoculate 30% of the global population. At nakita po natin na mahal na Presidente, since nung May, meron po tayong 2.2 million na COVAX volume. Ngayon po, dinagdagan po nila na magiging 4.2 million deliveries this month. At mamaya po i-present ko po yung details. And then also magkakaroon po tayo ng mga supply agreements, particularly po ang talagang pinapa-finalize po namin, yung supply agreement with Pfizer. Kasi pagka po nakuha po natin yon, 40 million po ang i-deliver po nila. more or less 15 million po ang ma-deliver ng third quarter, and the remaining will be on the fourth quarter. Malaki pong tulong po sa atin yun.
Galvez also said he's hoping that all 11,058,000 doses of COVID-19 jabs will be delivered as scheduled within this month. Steady vaccine delivery is expected beginning June 21, he said, including the deliveries of 1,170,000 doses of coronavirus vaccines procured by the private sector. The government is eyeing about 17 million doses of jabs in the stockpile in August.
And also in the Philippines, Quezon City Mayor Joy Belmonte said the city government has so far confirmed 86 COVID-19 positive residents who were at the food distribution event of Councilor Franz Pumaren in Barangay Matandang Balara on May 25th this year. During the Laging Handa public briefing aired over state-run PTV4 on Tuesday, Belmonte, however, said Pumaren has been cleared by the QC Police District of health protocol violations. Based on the QCPD investigation, Pumaren properly coordinated with law enforcers and the authorities before the event. Let's take a look.
Gusto ko rin lang munang banggitin na inabsuelto po ng Quezon City Police District si Konsehal Franz Pumaren sapagkat kanilang napagpasyahan that he did not act irresponsibly naman. Nagkaroon naman po ng sapat na pakikipag-ugnayan sa kapulisan at sa iba pa nating law enforcers. Nagkataon lang kasi na umulan ng malakas kung kaya't nagkaroon ng kaguluhan. But having said that, of course, I do believe that was a super spreader event dahil nung nagbalik ang mga tao sa kanilang linya ay medyo dikit-dikit na po sila, wala na pong social distancing, crowded na po talaga at yung iba ay dahil nabasa ang kanilang mga face shields at face masks ay medyo naging pabaya. And because of that, we have so far already identified 86 positive cases out of 953 that were tested doon sa event na yan. At doon sa tanong mo naman na are we sure we can test everyone? The answer is no kasi wala pong maayos na contact tracing na naisagawa. Wala pong listahan ng mga pangalan ng mga nag-attend ng ayudang yan at lahat ng mga shortcomings na nakita natin at pagkukulang ay atin na pong na-address ngayon through additional guidelines. But of course, tapos na po kasi yung super spreader na yan and we just have to make the most of what we have at that time. So ang ginagawa po ng mga contact tracers natin and they're working backwards, interviewing all the positive patients and trying to identify as many as possible of those that were present at that particular ayuda. Also, we noticed na marami din sa mga pumila sa ayuda pala na yan ay hindi taga Matandang Balara. Marami din palang taga ibang mga barangay kung kaya't hirap kaming hanapin lahat.
An estimated 950 attended the event, but not everyone was tested as there was no list of names and contact information. Belmonte assured they learned their lessons and additional guidelines have been formulated. She said giving of food aid is not prohibited.
Meanwhile, the Philippines is eyeing about 29 million for pediatric vaccination using the CoronaVac, Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna jabs. Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., Chief Implementer of the National Task Force Against COVID-19, said to be included are those aged 3 to 17 years old. Take a look.
And then ito pong pinag-aaralan po natin, yung at least 3 vaccines can be used for pediatric vaccination. Mamaya po pakikita po natin na yung 3 brand na meron po na silang advanced trial at meron pang 11 brands na trying to have their trial for the pediatric vaccination. Ito po talaga pag-prepare natin para pag-opening po ng mga classes. At nakikita po natin na malaki pong sizable amount yung ating pediatric populations na umigit kumulang na 29 million. So ito po yung mga balita na yung Moderna, meron po silang ginagawang clinical trial for ages 12 to 17. And then kahapon po, ang Sinovac ay naglabas po ng magandang balita na China has already approved for emergency use of the Sinovac from 3 years old to 17 years old. And then sa UK, ina-approve na po na yung Pfizer ay magamit po sa 12 to 15. And I believe the US also using Pfizer for 12 years old and above.
On Tuesday, Health Secretary Maria Rosario Vergere, Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere confirmed the Food and Drug Administration approved the emergency use authorization for Pfizer-BioNTech for the 12 to 15 age bracket.
And back here in Vietnam, once a model for its successful handling of the pandemic has started asking for public donations to buy vaccines as it struggles to contain a new coronavirus wave. Let's take a look.
Đến thời điểm này thì tôi chưa ủng hộ cho quỹ bởi vì tôi có những băn khoăn sau đây. Thứ nhất thì tôi không chắc chắn rằng số tiền mà tôi và mọi người ủng hộ mà sẽ được sử dụng cho mục đích duy nhất là mua vaccine và tiêm cho toàn dân.
A financial contribution from the community and society is needed to make a mass rollout possible, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh told the nation on Saturday during a live broadcast to launch the campaign. The Southeast Asian country has vaccinated only about 1% of its population of nearly 100 million, and authorities have become increasingly alarmed by a recent spike in cases. Since last week, mobile phone users have received up to 3 text messages urging them to contribute to a COVID-19 vaccine fund, while civil servants have been encouraged to part with a day's pay. In Vietnam's industrial northern provinces, home to key factories such as Samsung and Foxconn have been particularly badly hit by the latest outbreak. Across the country, tens of thousands of people have lost their jobs, according to state media, with bars and restaurants forced to close in major hubs such as Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, and public gatherings canceled.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by Security Bank.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced, not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Aguila Pilipinas. A 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Agila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Agila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to explain our health outdoor.
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Welcome back. The labor market crisis created by the pandemic is far from over, and employment growth will be insufficient to make up for the losses suffered until at least 2023. That according to a new assessment by the International Labor Organization. The ILO's World Employment and Social Outlook Trends 2021, or WESO Trends, projects the global crisis-induced jobs gap will reach 75 million in 2021 before falling to 23 million in 2022. Let's listen in.
Well, I think what our report does is to set out in really quite detailed terms what COVID-19 has done to people's working lives in the course of 2020, and it's been a dramatic story, we know that. And then, and I think this is perhaps more important at the current moment, look forward for the next couple of years, 2021, 2022, saying, well, at a time when we're thinking about recovery, well, what really does this recovery look like, and what does it mean for jobs and livelihoods? And I think we've done it in quite detailed and convincing way, there's a lot to worry about, because the first thing to say is, even on a optimistic scenario, the build back over the next year and a half until the end of 2022 is simply not, on current trends, going to restore the damage done by the pandemic. We'll still fall short by a large number of jobs, 23 million jobs in all likelihood. The second thing to worry about, and it's perhaps even more important, is the unevenness of the impact that the pandemic has had. It's hit the most disadvantaged, the most vulnerable, in countries and between countries. So what we're seeing is that the bounce back in labour markets, already apparent in some parts of the world, that's going to be stronger and better in the high-income countries. Why? Because they've got better access to vaccines and therefore are able to open up more quickly, but also because they've got more resources. They're richer countries. So the fiscal space, as we say, to support people and to support enterprises, to stimulate the economy, is that much greater. Whilst for the low-income countries, of course, they're disadvantaged in this regard. So contrary to what we saw, for example, back on the financial crisis, this is a recovery process that runs the risk, unless we take the right action, of making existing inequalities in the world of work, and they're very, very big inequalities, even worse. And we have to have a different way, a different trajectory of recovery, what we call a human-centered recovery, so that we don't see this increase in inequality. We need something which leaves nobody behind and provides greater equity of advantage in the world of work.
The Philippine National Police has filed criminal charges against 2 persons involved in the vaccine slot for sale scheme in Mandaluyong City. In a statement Wednesday, PNP Chief General Guillermo Eleazar said charges of estafa under Article 315 of the revised Penal Code, violation of Section 21-H, fixing and/or collusion with fixers of Republic Act 11032, or the Anti-Red Tape Law of 2007, and Section 6 of Republic Act 10175, or the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012, were filed against Sile Cedric Bonifacio and Melvin Gutierrez before the Mandaluyong City Prosecutor's Office on Monday. Bonifacio was turned over to authorities by his father, a village councilor in Mandaluyong, after the local police began looking for him after his identity was ascertained in an investigation. Eleazar said Bonifacio in his testimony said Gutierrez, a barangay fire volunteer, was the one who helped him get a vaccination slot in the city. Bonifacio added that he only intervened once to get the vaccination slot, and the 12,000 pesos given to him through online bank transfer was a reward. Eleazar added that an investigation by the Criminal Investigation and Detection Group and the Anti-Cybercrime Group is ongoing to determine other people who may be involved in the scheme. He further reminded that public that vaccination is offered for free by the different local governments, and that all they need to do is register and wait for their vaccination schedule. And Indonesia's hijab-wearing headbanging voice of Basiprot, noisy voice in English, have been praised by the likes of Nirvana and Rage Against the Machine, but the all-female heavy metal band faced a tougher battle in winning over their conservative hometown.
Semenjak baca buku, aku tuh jadi kayak muncul keberanian untuk bersuara. Karena mungkin di kampung itu dianggapnya rebel atau gak sopan, jadi kita tuh kayak sering mendapat omelan dari orang tua dan kurang mendapat teman.
Terus selain itu musik juga udah jadi kayak diary, tempat kita bercerita, terus tempat kita mendapatkan kebahagiaan dan berbagi kebahagiaan itu kepada orang lain. Jika kemudian orang bisa ngambil sesuatu, bisa yang tadi disebut pesan, itu ya syukur-syukur aja gitu. Kita mah nggak pernah terbebani dengan ini tuh harus nyampein sesuatu gitu ke audiens gitu, enggak.
As always, thank you very much, Charlene, for keeping me company today.
Thank you so much, Alma. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. This is Charlene Navaja from your EBC Vietnam Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Charlene. I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back tomorrow. We live in interesting times.
Broadcast journalist Wang de la Fuente returns on Philippine television.